Thomas Wright adjusted his glasses, peering through the dusty window of his small research station nestled in the quiet countryside near Manchester. The morning light cast long shadows across his cluttered desk, filled with geological maps and weathered notebooks. Outside, the world seemed ordinary. Green fields stretching endlessly, sheep grazing peacefully, and a gentle breeze rustling through the nearby trees. But something felt different today. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly. At first, Thomas thought it was his imagination. He was a 42-year-old geologist who had spent decades studying rock formations and geological patterns, but this sensation was unlike anything he had experienced before. His colleague, Emily Parker, entered the room carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice tight with sudden tension. Thomas nodded, his fingers already moving across his computer keyboard, checking seismic monitoring systems. The readings were unusual, not violent, but persistent. Subtle vibrations coursed through the earth, like a heartbeat growing stronger with each passing minute. Thousands of miles away in the remote Himalayan mountains, something extraordinary was happening. Ancient rock formations that had remained unchanged for millennia began to shift. Massive stone-like structures buried deep within mountain ranges started to move with a slow, deliberate purpose. In research stations and geological centers around the world, scientists began receiving strange data. Seismographs recorded movements that defied traditional understanding. These weren't typical earthquake patterns. Something was awakening. Thomas contacted his international network of geological researchers. Dr. William Bennett from Cambridge University confirmed similar readings. "It's like the Earth itself is breathing," William explained during their video call. "Something is changing, but we don't understand what." Back in his research station, Thomas pulled out old manuscripts, documents passed down through generations of geological researchers. Legends spoke of ancient guardians, beings connected deeply with the planet's core. Most scientists had dismissed these as myths, but Thomas had always been different. He believed that every legend carried a kernel of truth. Emily watched him work, her own excitement building. She had worked with Thomas for over a decade and knew his intuition was rarely wrong. "What do you think is happening?" she asked. Thomas traced his finger along an old map, his eyes focused and determined. "Something is awakening," he whispered. "Something that has been sleeping for a very long time." The day progressed, and news began spreading. Military installations started monitoring the unusual geological activities. Governments grew nervous, sensing something significant was about to happen. Thomas continued collecting data, his fingers moving swiftly across computer keyboards, analyzing every small detail. Each vibration, each minute geological shift was carefully recorded and examined. As evening approached, the tremors increased, not violently, but with a rhythm that suggested intelligence. It was as if something was communicating, not through sound, but through the very ground beneath humanity's feet. Emily prepared more tea, her hands slightly shaking. The research station, typically a place of calm scientific study, now felt charged with anticipation and mystery. "We're witnessing something historic," Thomas said, his voice a mixture of excitement and profound respect. "Something that might change everything we understand about our planet." Outside, the sheep continued grazing. The trees continued swaying. To an untrained eye, nothing seemed different, but Thomas and Emily knew something extraordinary was about to unfold. The first tremors were just the beginning. Humanity stood on the edge of a remarkable discovery, unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to reveal secrets older than civilization itself. Thomas Wright looked out the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in deep oranges and purples. Something was coming. Something that would challenge everything humans thought they knew about their world. And he would be ready. The Earth continued its subtle dance, whispering secrets that only the most attentive could hear. General Richard Holmes stood in the command center, his weathered hands gripping a digital map showing the extraordinary geological movements spreading across the globe. Military bases from London to Washington buzzed with tension, radars tracking something unprecedented. The Titans, massive stone-like beings, were emerging from mountain ranges, their movements slow but unstoppable. Tanks rolled into position. Fighter jets scrambled, but everyone knew traditional weapons would be useless. In Manchester, Thomas Wright and Emily Parker worked frantically, analyzing every piece of data they could gather. Their small research station had become the unexpected center of global scientific investigation. "They're not attacking," Thomas muttered, studying complex seismic readings. "They're communicating." Military commanders disagreed. General Holmes prepared strategic defense protocols, convinced these massive beings represented an immediate threat to human civilization. Soldiers checked their equipment, tension thick in military bases worldwide. News networks broadcast continuous coverage. Ordinary people watched in fear and fascination as enormous stone figures slowly emerged from mountain ranges. Social media exploded with theories, panic, and wild speculation. In small towns and big cities, people responded differently. Some packed emergency bags, others gathered in community centers, while many simply watched news reports, unable to comprehend the unfolding events. Emily discovered something remarkable during their research. These titans weren't random geological anomalies. They seemed connected to Earth's ecological systems in ways no scientist had previously understood. "They're responding to something," she told Thomas, her voice a mixture of excitement and concern. "Not preparing for destruction, but perhaps delivering a message." Military satellites tracked the Titans' movements. Each step caused minimal physical damage, but generated massive electromagnetic disturbances. Traditional communication systems struggled to maintain stability. Government leaders from different countries held emergency meetings. The United Nations convened an urgent session, with representatives discussing potential responses to this global phenomenon. Thomas analyzed geological data showing the Titans' movement patterns. They weren't random. Each movement seemed calculated, deliberate, almost intelligent. General Holmes prepared military responses, but Thomas knew conventional warfare would be futile. These beings represented something far beyond human understanding. "We need to communicate, not combat," Thomas explained during an international video conference. Many military leaders initially dismissed his suggestion, but some began to listen. The world watched and waited. Children asked parents what was happening. Scientists worked around the clock. Military personnel remained on high alert. Each Titan's movement created massive geological shifts. Mountains seemed to breathe, rock formations transformed, and the very ground appeared alive in ways humanity had never witnessed. Emily's research suggested these beings might be ancient guardians, awakened by massive environmental changes. Their emergence seemed connected to humanity's impact on the planet, a response, not an invasion. "They're trying to tell us something," she repeated, her voice growing more confident with each passing hour. Global communication networks struggled. Internet bandwidth collapsed under massive information traffic. People shared theories, fears, and unexpected moments of wonder. Thomas realized they were witnessing something extraordinary, a potential communication between humanity and an ancient planetary intelligence. Military strategies slowly shifted from pure defense to cautious observation. The Titans moved with a grace that suggested intelligence far beyond simple geological movement. As night fell across different continents, the world remained on edge. These stone-like beings continued their slow, deliberate journey across mountain ranges, their purpose still unknown. General Holmes watched monitoring screens, his decades of military experience challenged by something entirely unprecedented. These weren't enemies that could be defeated by traditional means. Thomas and Emily continued their research, knowing they stood at the edge of a discovery that could transform human understanding of our planet and our place within it. The Titans moved. The Earth responded. Humanity watched and waited, caught between fear and an unexplainable sense of anticipation. Something remarkable was happening, and nobody knew exactly what it would mean. Dr. William Bennett arrived at the research station, his worn leather briefcase filled with linguistic research tools that looked more like science fiction than traditional academic equipment. Thomas and Emily greeted him with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. "We need to understand their language," William explained, setting up complex translation devices designed to decode patterns rather than traditional words. The machines hummed with an intelligent energy, connecting to global satellite networks. The Titans continued their slow movement across mountain ranges, causing minimal physical damage, but generating massive electromagnetic disturbances. Each step seemed calculated, each movement deliberate. Thomas noticed something fascinating. The Titans weren't random geological formations, but appeared to have a communication system based on vibrational frequencies. Their movements created subtle earth patterns that resembled a complex language. "They're communicating," Emily whispered, "but not how we traditionally understand communication." William's translation algorithms began decoding strange patterns. Mathematical sequences emerged, not human language, but a complex system of environmental data transmission. The Titans seemed to be sharing information about planetary health. Government representatives from different countries watched the research team's progress. Some saw potential threat, others saw an unprecedented opportunity for understanding. The research revealed shocking insights. These Titans were connected to Earth's ecological systems in ways no previous scientific model had ever predicted. They appeared to be responding to decades of environmental destruction, not as attackers, but as guardians. Military installations gradually shifted their approach. General Richard Holmes, initially skeptical, now listened carefully to Thomas and William's presentations. The potential for communication seemed more important than potential conflict. Satellite imagery showed the Titans moving through mountain ranges, leaving minimal physical impact. Their path seemed carefully chosen, almost like they were mapping something invisible to human perception. William's breakthrough came unexpectedly. By treating their movement as a language, he discovered complex environmental data embedded in their geological patterns. They were sharing information about climate changes, ecological disruptions, and planetary health. "They're not invading," William explained during an international conference. "They're responding to our planet's distress signals." Emily's research complemented William's findings. She discovered that the Titans' emergence coincided with critical environmental tipping points: massive deforestation, ocean pollution, and rapid climate change. Thomas realized they were witnessing something extraordinary, a planetary immune response. The Titans weren't attackers, but a complex ecological correction mechanism. Global scientific communities began collaborating in ways never seen before. Researchers from different countries shared data, setting aside historical conflicts to understand this unprecedented phenomenon. The Titans continued their journey, each movement generating massive data streams. They seemed patient, methodical, waiting for humanity to understand their message. William's translation devices captured increasingly complex information: environmental patterns, geological health indicators, and planetary restoration strategies emerged from their mysterious communication. General Holmes watched the research, his military perspective gradually transforming. These weren't enemies to be fought, but potentially powerful allies in planetary restoration. Thomas felt a sense of profound wonder. Humanity stood at the edge of understanding something far larger than themselves, a complex planetary intelligence that had been dormant for millennia. International leaders began listening. Scientific teams from different countries collaborated, sharing resources and knowledge in unprecedented ways. The Titans moved slowly, their massive forms carrying messages written in a language of geological frequencies. They weren't just moving. They were communicating a complex planetary health report. Emily looked at Thomas, her eyes bright with understanding. "They're trying to help us," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and reverence. As days passed, the world watched and waited. The Titans continued their slow, deliberate journey, carrying a message of planetary restoration, environmental healing, and unexpected hope. Something remarkable was happening. Humanity was about to learn a new way of listening, not just with ears, but with an entire planet. Robert Thompson nervously adjusted his tie as he prepared to address the United Nations Environmental Conference. At 35, he was the youngest minister ever to present a global restoration strategy, inspired by the Titans' mysterious communication. International leaders from every continent sat quietly, waiting. The massive conference hall felt different. No more tension, no more national rivalries. Something fundamental had changed in human communication. Thomas Wright and Emily Parker sat in the front row, watching their research finally transform into global policy. The Titans had shown humanity a new way of understanding planetary health. "We're not just saving the planet," Robert began, his voice clear and confident. "We're saving ourselves." Behind him, complex holographic displays showed planetary restoration strategies. Green technologies, sustainable infrastructure, and ecological healing methods covered every continent. The Titans had shared knowledge that transformed human understanding of environmental systems. Satellite imagery revealed extraordinary changes. Forests that had been destroyed were growing back at unprecedented rates. Oceans were cleaning themselves. Species once near extinction were returning to their natural habitats. The Titans continued their slow, deliberate movements across mountain ranges. But now, instead of fear, people watched with respect and understanding. They were no longer seen as threats, but as planetary guardians. Scientific teams from China, Brazil, Russia, and the United States worked together in ways never seen before. Historical conflicts disappeared, replaced by a shared mission of planetary restoration. Emily's research had revealed that the Titans were connected to Earth's core ecological systems. They weren't just massive beings. They were living communication networks that understood planetary health at a molecular level. Governments began implementing radical new policies. Cities were redesigned to work with natural ecosystems. Technologies were developed that could heal environmental damage instead of causing it. Robert showed images of new urban designs, buildings that produced more oxygen than they consumed, infrastructure that worked like living organisms, transportation systems that cleaned the air as they moved. "We've learned to listen," he told the conference, "not just to each other, but to the planet itself." The Titans had taught humanity a profound lesson. Environmental health wasn't about managing resources, but about understanding complex planetary systems. Every action had a consequence, every choice mattered. Young scientists presented breakthrough technologies, methods to restore coral reefs, techniques to regenerate forests, systems that could clean entire oceans within years, not centuries. Thomas watched with tears in his eyes. The research he had begun decades ago had transformed human civilization. What once seemed like an impossible dream was now becoming reality. General Richard Holmes, now retired, sat in the conference, his military perspective completely transformed. The Titans had shown that true security came from planetary health, not military might. Global education systems changed. Children now learned about ecological balance from their earliest years. They understood their connection to the planet in ways previous generations never could. Emily's research team continued decoding the Titans' complex communication systems. Each discovery revealed deeper insights into planetary interconnectedness. Renewable energy replaced fossil fuels completely. Solar, wind, and new technologies developed from Titan communication transformed global energy systems. "We are not separate from the planet," Robert concluded. "We are part of it." The conference erupted in applause, but it wasn't just celebration, it was a commitment. A promise to continue the work of healing, of understanding, of working in harmony with the planet. Outside the conference hall, the world looked different, cleaner, more alive. Cities breathed, forests grew, oceans healed. The Titans continued their slow journey, watching, waiting, guiding. Humanity had finally learned to listen. As the conference ended, Robert looked at Thomas and Emily. They had started this journey, and now the entire world was continuing it. A new chapter in human history had begun, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. Thomas Wright sat in his favorite chair, his hands slightly trembling with age, watching the transformed world through the window of his research station. Decades had passed since the Titans first emerged, and everything had changed. The young scientists who continued his work moved around the station with a sense of purpose and hope. Emily Parker, now with silver hair, sat beside him, both remembering the extraordinary journey that had reshaped human civilization. Cities looked different now. Green technologies covered building surfaces, Vertical gardens rose between skyscrapers. The air was cleaner, the waters clearer. The Titans had taught humanity a valuable lesson about living in harmony with the planet. "We did it," Emily whispered, squeezing Thomas's hand. "We actually did it." Young researchers like Robert Thompson continued pushing the boundaries of environmental restoration. Technologies developed through Titan communication had revolutionized how humans understood and interacted with their planet. Schools now taught a new curriculum. Children learned about planetary health, ecological balance, and the importance of working with natural systems. The Titans had become more than just mysterious beings. They were now teachers and guardians. Global cooperation had replaced old conflicts. Nations that once fought now worked together, sharing technologies and environmental restoration strategies. The Titans had shown humanity something profound, that survival depended on cooperation, not competition. Thomas remembered the early days of fear and uncertainty. Now the world breathed differently. Massive reforestation projects covered continents. Oceans were healing. Species once on the brink of extinction were returning. The Titans continued their slow, deliberate movements across the planet. But now, instead of fear, people watched with respect and understanding. They were no longer seen as threats, but as partners in planetary healing. Emily reviewed some research documents, her eyes sparkling with the same curiosity that had driven her decades ago. "Look how far we've come," she said, showing Thomas a report about global environmental recovery. Renewable energy had replaced fossil fuels. Cities were designed to work with natural ecosystems. Human technology had transformed, inspired by the Titans' understanding of planetary balance. Young scientists approached Thomas and Emily, listening to their stories about the first days of Titan emergence. They were like living history, witnesses to the most significant transformation in human history. "Tell us again," a young researcher named James would ask, "how did you first understand them?" Thomas would smile, remembering those uncertain days. He would describe how communication replaced fear, how understanding had been the key to survival. The world outside looked like a living, breathing ecosystem. Buildings seemed to grow from the ground. Technologies worked in harmony with natural systems. The line between human creation and natural environment had blurred. Global leadership had changed. Politicians now came from scientific backgrounds, understanding the complex planetary systems that the Titans had revealed. Decision-making was based on long-term ecological health, not short-term economic gains. Thomas watched a group of children in the research station's garden. They played among plants that seemed to grow with extraordinary vitality, learning about planetary systems as naturally as previous generations had learned basic mathematics. Emily prepared tea, a ritual that had remained unchanged through all these years of transformation. Some things, she believed, should always stay simple and human. "We listened," Thomas said suddenly, looking at Emily. "When everyone else wanted to fight, we chose to understand." The Titans continued their slow journey across continents, but now they moved alongside humanity, not as separate beings but as partners in planetary restoration. As sunset painted the sky in beautiful colors, Thomas felt a deep sense of peace. The world had changed, not through conflict, but through communication, understanding, and hope. A new chapter in human history had begun, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The research station hummed with life, with hope, with the promise of continued discovery. Outside, the planet breathed, healthy, alive, restored.